Welcome to Two No Stories. Here, we reveal shocking tales of betrayal and deception, where secrets unfold and karma strikes back. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Your support keeps us going and helps bring even more exciting tales to life. Now, sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's story. Growing up in a small town just outside of Chicago, I always believed my family was my foundation. We were not the kind to let words linger unspoken or to drift apart for months without communication. My brother Nathan and I shared a bond that was marked by the typical rivalry of two boys living together under one roof. He was a year my junior, and comparisons between us were a constant presence. He embodied charm and a carefree spirit, whereas I leaned towards being more methodical and strategic. Our sister Sophie, the youngest, was perpetually the baby of the family, forever in our mom's orbit, absorbing every ounce of attention available to her. Our parents, Margaret and Richard, embodied the essence of Midwestern charm. Mom managed the household with strict authority, while Dad was the easygoing comedian who relished grilling steaks as if it were his ultimate calling. I believed I had it all sorted: a solid family, dependable siblings, and a fiancée whom I thought was my destined partner. Olivia entered my life while we were collaborating on a group project in my junior year at UChicago. She possessed an irresistible charm that captivated everyone around her. Driven, self-assured, and undeniably alluring, I was captivated by her in no time. As the semester drew to a close, we found ourselves as a couple. It all seemed like a tempest, yet I never thought to challenge it. It appeared flawless. I envisioned our life ahead, with careers, children, and all that comes with it. On a November evening, I made my proposal to her. It wasn't a magnificent display, merely the two of us on a cool autumn evening. She accepted, and we started organizing our wedding for the upcoming summer. It seemed like the beginning of the life I had always envisioned. And then, everything fell apart in March. After a sluggish Friday at work, I chose to delight Olivia with her favorite takeout and enjoy a cozy evening together. As I stepped into our apartment, an unsettling sensation washed over me. Her shoes lay by the door, yet the atmosphere was unsettlingly silent, interrupted only by distant laughter drifting from the bedroom. I attempted to dismiss it, assuming she could be on a call or engrossed in a humorous video. A nagging sense of unease lingered in the air, as if something was amiss. As I swung the bedroom door open, everything I knew came crashing down. There they were, Olivia and Nathan, entwined in the sheets. Olivia donned the oversized t-shirt I had gifted her for Valentine's Day, the one adorned with the cheesy heart print. It was a swift process to connect all the dots. They stood still, resembling startled deer caught in the glare of oncoming headlights. It's amusing how quietude can convey so much. Nathan, my own brother, had the audacity to claim, "It's not what it appears to be." I simply gazed at him, nearly chuckling at the absurdity of it all. Olivia remained silent. She hurriedly pulled the blanket around herself, as though that could somehow wipe away the image I had just witnessed. I remained silent, refraining from raising my voice or inquiring further. What purpose would that serve? The proof lay directly before my eyes. I glanced at Olivia and said in a steady voice, "Gather your things and leave." I refused to let them have the pleasure of witnessing my unraveling. Nathan attempted to murmur an explanation about how it all unfolded, but I interrupted him. "You no longer hold any significance in my life." I had no desire to listen to his justifications or insincere regret. There's no such thing as "it just happened" when it comes to being intimate with your brother's fiancée. I stepped outside. I didn't linger for an explanation or a feeble apology. That night, I picked up my keys and headed over to a friend's place. As I reclined, gazing at the ceiling, the weight of it all settled in. The woman I intended to marry, my fiancé, and my brother, whom I held in high regard, have betrayed me in the most devastating manner imaginable. It was more than simply the act of betrayal. It was the reality that they had both deliberately opted to dismantle something I cherished so profoundly. The day after I discovered Olivia and Nathan, I couldn't imagine how things could possibly deteriorate further. Naturally, they did. During my time at work, Olivia vacated the apartment. I had already instructed her to gather her things and depart, so I assumed that was the conclusion of the matter. Upon returning home that evening, I found a note waiting for me on the counter, exactly at the spot where we once displayed a framed photo of ourselves. It was brief, yet far from pleasant. She expressed that she had developed feelings for Nathan and never intended to cause me pain, accompanied by some rambling about wishing I could find it in my heart to forgive them. She had the nerve to conclude with, "I hope you can still find happiness for us one day." Thrilled for them, I felt the urge to laugh. Yet it simply didn't strike me as amusing. It was utterly maddening. I folded the note and discarded it into the bin. All words had faded away between us. The apartment seemed devoid of life without her belongings. Yet I remained indifferent. I simply wanted her gone from my life quickly. And now she was. It didn't take long for my family to discover what had transpired. I kept it to myself. But it seems that either Olivia or Nathan let the cat out of the bag. My mother, Margaret, reached out to me right away. She was seething with anger. Not directed at me, but at Nathan. She repeatedly expressed her disbelief that her own son could betray me in such a way. She kept insisting that he wasn't welcome here. Initially, it was reassuring to have her support. Yet, I wasn't so foolish as to believe it would endure. My mother's loyalty has always been based on certain conditions. She took great pride in maintaining the unity of the family, even if it required burying significant betrayals beneath the surface. I knew it was just a question of when she would begin to stand up for Nathan. My father, Richard, stood out in his own unique way. When I finally picked up one of his calls, he didn't say much, he just sighed and remarked, "Well, I suppose things like this occur sometimes." I was utterly astonished. He felt no anger, no upset, and certainly no surprise. He acted as if Nathan had just splashed coffee all over my shirt. It's not as if he had ruined my relationship and broken my trust in him. Sophie, my younger sister, attempted to offer her support, yet I sensed her inner conflict. She reached out to see how I was doing and expressed her disbelief over Nathan and Olivia's actions. Yet I could sense the uncertainty in her tone. She found herself in the middle of me and the rest of the family. And it was clear to see. For weeks, I turned a deaf ear to their incessant calls. I lacked the energy to revisit the events or entertain justifications for why I should move on. I immersed myself in my tasks. It was the sole anchor that held me steady. Daniel, my boss, observed my commitment to working extra hours and inquired if all was well. I chose not to share every detail, but I did acknowledge that I was handling some personal matters. At that moment, he brought up the Pittsburgh office. It seems they had been having difficulty locating a suitable leader for the team. And Daniel believed I would be an ideal choice. It was an opportunity for advancement and a means to escape Chicago. Leaving behind Olivia and the chaos they had woven together, I acted without a moment's doubt. I expressed my interest to him. When I told my parents about the move, my dad just said, "Good for you. A new beginning could be just what you're looking for." My mom, in contrast, reacted as if I had declared I was moving to the moon. She wept and implored me to think again. "What are your thoughts on family dinners? What are your thoughts on Nathanamus? We can't be left behind. Ethan," she implored. I assured her that I wouldn't abandon them. I was departing from Nathan. He's no longer a member of this family, I stated with conviction. Yet deep down, I had my doubts. My mom has a talent for expressing one idea and then acting in complete contradiction when it benefits her. By July, my intuition was validated. Nathan had returned to the house. One evening, my mom called and mentioned, almost nonchalantly, that they had chosen to allow him to come home for a bit since he had nowhere else to turn. She pretended it was nothing, as if inviting the one who had wronged me into her home was perfectly fine. All while expecting me to attend Sunday dinners without a second thought. I didn't even attempt to conceal my anger. I expressed to her that it felt like a harsh blow to realize she was opting for him instead of me. She attempted to rationalize it, asserting, "He's still my son. Turning him away is not an option for me." I retorted, "He's no longer my brother, and I want nothing to do with him." That's when she launched her campaign for family unity. She continued to elaborate on the importance of healing and progressing together as a family. It was merely a facade to absolve Nathan, allowing her to escape the weight of guilt for welcoming him back into her life. I refused to accept it. I expressed clearly that I had no desire for healing or to feign that everything was fine. Is there such a thing as family unity? Perhaps it's time to reconsider rewarding the individual who caused all this chaos," I remarked before ending the call. Following that, I maintained my distance. I was occupied with getting ready for the relocation to Detroit regardless. I discovered a new location, gathered my belongings, and embarked on a new beginning in a city where my family and history were unknown. Departing from Milwaukee proved to be quite a challenge. I cherished the memories I made there, and a part of me felt as though departing meant conceding to Nathan and Olivia. Yet remaining would have been even more detrimental. Each street, each restaurant, every cherished memory, it all echoed the absence of what I once had. Relocating was the sole path to genuinely begin anew. When I departed, I had nearly severed all connections with my family. I ignored their calls and chose not to reply to their texts. Even Sophie's efforts to remain impartial had lost their significance. They chose to welcome Nathan back, while I chose to move on without them. The future was uncertain, yet one truth stood out unmistakably. I was finished with being the dutiful son who consistently prioritized family above all else. From this moment forward, I will prioritize myself. The moment had arrived to reconstruct according to my vision. By September, I had embraced my new life in Detroit. Severing connections with my family proved to be the most beneficial choice I ever made. Despite the challenges it presented, things were progressing nicely at work. I had begun to forge new friendships, and the separation from all the turmoil was precisely what I required. Then, my mother, Margaret, reached out to me. With her birthday approaching, she expressed her desire for me to return home to join in the celebration. I paused. Our connection had grown tense ever since she allowed Nathan back into the home. Yet she continued to insist, claiming it would only be immediate family and expressing how much she missed me. Despite my reservations, I consented. The journey to my parents' house stretched on, leaving me ample opportunity to reconsider my choice. I convinced myself that this was for my mom. Despite the disappointment she had caused me, perhaps it wouldn't be so terrible if it were only her, my dad, and Sophie. As I arrived at the house, an unsettling feeling washed over me. There were an excessive number of cars parked outside. A wave of unease washed over me as I spotted Nathan's car in the driveway. My hands clenched the steering wheel as I wrestled with the idea of turning back. Yet I refused to grant my mom the satisfaction of backing out. I chose to enter, say what needed to be said, and exit quickly. Upon entering, my mom welcomed me with a warm smile, as if nothing had ever transpired. "Ethan, I'm so glad you came," she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around me in a warm embrace. Her energy was exuberant, as if she were attempting to resolve everything with an overwhelming determination. I surveyed the living room, and there they were, Nathan and Olivia, perched on the couch as if the weight of the world had no bearing on them. Olivia audaciously laughed at something Sophie said. I remained motionless, engulfed in a haze of astonishment. "What brings them here?" I inquired, my tone subdued yet incisive. Before my mother could respond, she took hold of my arm and guided me deeper into the house. Upon entering the living room, my mom launched into her familiar discourse on the importance of family healing. She took a seat beside me and began to express her thoughts on how Nathan and Olivia had erred but were genuinely remorseful, emphasizing that it was time for us to progress together as a family. Nathan, always unrepentant, interjected with, "I'm sorry, man, it just happened," as if it were merely the act of spilling coffee on me, rather than unraveling my entire existence. Olivia followed up with, "We never meant to hurt you," but it sounded even more absurd coming from her. She didn't even attempt to appear sorry. I gazed at them, attempting to comprehend how they could convince themselves of their own fabrications. Their belief that this could be remedied was nearly comical. I leaned in, locked eyes with Nathan, and declared, "You're a sorry excuse for a brother." Then, I turned to Olivia and said, "I hope he betrays you as well and brings you something unpleasant. I'm certain that if he doesn't, you will definitely betray him. You are truly meant for one another." The atmosphere grew eerily quiet. I interrupted my mom before she could finish her thought. I rose to my feet, met her gaze directly, and declared, "Enjoy your golden boy. Please refrain from contacting me again. This family of yours no longer holds any significance for me." As I stepped outside, I could hear my mom attempting to soothe the crowd. mentioning something about how I would eventually see things differently. Nathan remained silent, while Olivia sat in stillness. I entered my car and drove away, leaving the past behind me. Thoughts were swirling rapidly in my head. How could my mom believe this was acceptable? How could she anticipate that I would simply forgive and move on? As if this were merely trivial disputes rather than a betrayal that completely dismantled my existence. The remainder of the day was consumed with attempts to find solace. Yet the fury lingered on. I found myself revisiting this moment repeatedly, longing to have expressed myself more fully. A part of me felt the urge to reach out to my mom and share everything. Yet deep down, I understood it wouldn't change a thing. Her decision was clear the moment she welcomed Nathan and Olivia back into her life. That night, I decided to block her number, as well as Nathan's. Despite the fact that he hadn't contacted me in months, I anticipated that it was just a question of when one of them would attempt to address the situation once more. And I was not keen on facing it. In the weeks that followed, I withdrew into my own world, immersing myself in my work, using it as a refuge, and dedicating myself to every project that came my way. My coworkers likely assumed I was simply very committed, but the reality was that I was unsure of any other way to express my frustration. I also ceased my social media browsing, as viewing images of my family would merely bring back memories of the past. And I had no desire for that sort of negativity. I convinced myself that I was better off without them. Yet it still hurt to realize that those I once held in such high regard had disappointed me so profoundly. Gradually, I began to experience an improvement in my well-being. The space was beneficial, and I was gradually reconstructing my existence. I convinced myself that I could forge my own family with those who truly valued me. Yet beneath the surface, I understood that this was far from finished. My mom had a tenacity that was hard to ignore, and I sensed she would discover yet another method to pull me back into the chaos. For the time being, I found satisfaction in maintaining my distance and concentrating on my own journey. Allow them to embrace their familial bond. I would prefer solitude over being in the company of those who fail to appreciate my worth. If they chose to remain oblivious to the actions of Nathan and Olivia, that was entirely up to them. I had no intention of getting involved. Uncertainty loomed ahead, yet one truth remained undeniable. I had reached my limit in allowing them to control my existence. From this moment forward, I would embrace life according to my own rules. By January, life in Pittsburgh had transformed into all that I had envisioned. It was refreshing to be far removed from the turmoil my family had stirred up. I no longer woke up each day filled with anger. I found room to reflect, contemplate, and prioritize my own needs. It was then that Emma, my distant cousin, reached out to me through messages. I hardly knew her at all. Our encounters had been limited to a handful of family gatherings, and I doubt we had ever shared more than a few brief exchanges. When she reached out unexpectedly, mentioning her move to Pittsburgh and her need for assistance in settling down, I found myself feeling a bit doubtful initially. I considered completely overlooking her message. My family had shown repeatedly that any involvement with them, even from a distance, was a misstep, yet a part of me felt remorseful. Emma hadn't wronged me directly, and she may not even be aware of the complete narrative of what had transpired. Moreover, she appeared truly anxious about relocating to a new city by herself. Despite my reservations, I found myself agreeing to assist her. The weekend arrived, and I made my way to the address she provided. The apartment complex nestled in a tranquil corner of the town was modest in size. As I drove into the parking lot, everything appeared ordinary, until my eyes landed on the U-Haul truck and two unmistakable figures unloading boxes, Nathan and my dad. For a moment, I was paralyzed, clutching the steering wheel with such intensity that my knuckles turned pale. My initial impulse was to reverse out of the parking lot and leave it all behind. Just as I was about to, the front door of the apartment swung open, revealing my mom stepping out. She noticed me right away and waved, as if we were at a family gathering rather than a setup. "Ethan, hold on," she called out, running toward my car. I shifted the car into park but remained still, not moving an inch closer. "What is this all about?" I inquired, pointing towards Nathan and my dad by the truck, both appearing somewhat uncomfortable. My mom gave that familiar, weary look, launching into her typical speech about how Emma just needed support and how it was only logical for the family to unite. This was clearly not about Emma in any way. It was about pushing me back into their harmful pattern of making up. Nathan, always the master of insincere remorse, moved closer, tears beginning to well up in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Ethan," he said, his voice quivering as though he were performing for an audience. "I recognize that I made a mistake. My desire is simply to make improvements." I gazed at him, unyielding. His words echoed the same tired lines he'd used at my mom's birthday celebration. Then, my father participated. "Ethan, please," he said, his voice laced with that familiar condescension he reserved for moments when he believed I was being irrational. "This grudge you're clinging to is causing a rift in the family. Rise above the situation." That was the end. His words, suggesting that Nathan's betrayal was merely a trivial error I should simply move past, pushed me to my breaking point. He was oblivious to the pain of betrayal by his own brother, to the profound loss of not only a relationship but also the trust once held in those nearest to him. As my father approached and rested his hand on my shoulder, I found myself lost in thought. My fist struck his face before I fully comprehended my actions. The piercing echo of collision reverberated, and for an instant, silence enveloped the scene. My father recoiled, clutching his jaw, his eyes filled with disbelief. Nathan appeared as if he wished to disappear entirely, while my mom, as expected, was overcome with tears. "Ethan," she cried, as though I were the one destroying it all. Nathan grumbled quietly about my actions crossing a line, yet I chose not to engage with his comment. I pivoted and made my way back. Each step weighted as I approached my vehicle. "Don't follow me," I called over my shoulder. Upon arriving home, I swiftly blocked Emma's number without a second thought. It didn't matter to me whether she was complicit in the plan or merely a naive participant. I had no desire to be involved with her at all. That evening, I found myself on the couch, attempting to make sense of the events that had just unfolded. I felt a mix of emotions about losing my temper, while it wasn't something I took pride in. I had no regrets about it. My father had overstepped, and if it required a blow to make them realize that I would no longer be controlled, then so be it. The most painful part was the sheer predictability of it all. My mother consistently showed a remarkable capacity for forgiveness towards Nathan, regardless of the harm he inflicted. My dad prioritized keeping the peace over addressing the actual problem. I found myself contemplating the duration of their scheming. Were they engaged in discussions with Emma for weeks, persuading her to contact me? Or was this merely a spontaneous effort? No matter what, it was of no consequence. What was important was that I had managed to step away before they could pull me back in. The following morning, I awoke to a peculiar blend of relief and melancholy. It was a sense of relief, knowing I had stood my ground. Melancholy enveloped me, as it served as yet another stark reminder of the depths to which my family had descended. This was beyond repair. They turned a blind eye to Nathan and Olivia's betrayal, and they always would. I decided to sever connections even more deeply. I decided not to grant them any further chances to drag me into their chaos. By December, I found myself in a significantly improved state, both emotionally and mentally. Life in Pittsburgh unfolded with a sense of rhythm. I began a relationship with Madeline, a 24-year-old woman who swiftly became my support system. Her kindness, humor, and support were truly remarkable. And above all, she honored my boundaries. She was aware of the turmoil within my family and never once urged me to reach out again. When she invited me to spend Nathanmas with her family in Bay City, I felt a genuine excitement for the holidays that I hadn't experienced in years. Her parents exuded warmth and hospitality. Her siblings were wonderful companions. And there was an absence of the drama that had consistently overshadowed my own family gatherings. Just a week prior to Nathanmas, an unexpected letter arrived in my hands. Initially, I nearly overlooked it due to the unfamiliar handwriting, but upon opening it, a wave of unease washed over me. It came from my mom. She mentioned that Nathan and Olivia had tied the knot and that my parents were now apart. She was vague with the specifics but repeatedly stressed the importance of my presence for the family this Nathanmas. She implored me to return, yearning for an opportunity to mend and progress. I perused the letter twice. attempting to discern whether it genuinely pertained to me or was merely another effort to rectify the chaos Nathan had created. The reference to their union filled me with unease. It felt like a harsh awakening, a stark reminder that they had continued their lives without any hint of regret. Upon presenting the letter to Madeline, she advised me to move on from it. "You don't owe them anything," she said softly. "If it's only going to cause you pain, there's no point in enduring it." She was correct, yet a tiny part of me still experienced guilt, not for severing ties, but for the sense of duty my mother had always ingrained in me. Ultimately, I chose to celebrate Nathantmas with Madeline's family. They resided in a charming home nestled in the suburbs of Bay City, and upon our arrival, I instantly felt reassured that I had made the perfect decision. Her parents welcomed me with warm embraces, and her mom promptly inquired if I preferred hot chocolate or mulled cider. It was straightforward, pure, and unlike anything I had encountered in years. On Nathantmas Eve, we adorned the tree, whipped up some cookies, and enjoyed a few rounds of board games. It was the type of holiday I had always dreamed of but never truly experienced. For once, I found myself in a moment of unexpected calm, free from the anticipation of conflict. Nathantmas morning unfolded with a serene tranquility. Madeline's family embraced the delightful tradition of unwrapping gifts while clad in their cozy pajamas. And they thoughtfully prepared a stocking adorned with my name. It was considerate, straightforward, and gave me a genuine sense of belonging. Yet, even in the midst of all that warmth and joy, thoughts of my family remained in the recesses of my mind. I found myself pondering their activities, questioning if my mother was spending time in solitude at home, if my father was engaging in any celebrations, or if Nathan and Olivia were merely putting on a facade of normalcy. I set the thoughts aside, immersing myself in the present moment. I refused to allow their theatrics to spoil this experience for me. In January, as I was getting comfortable in my routine, an email from Sophie landed in my inbox. After months of silence, discovering her name in my inbox was quite the unexpected delight. Despite my reservations, I decided to open it. Sophie mentioned that my dad was currently residing in a motel, and Nathan and Olivia were facing financial difficulties. She alluded to Nathan's precarious job situation and suggested that Olivia was dissatisfied in their marriage. Though she refrained from elaborating further, I gazed at the screen, pondering why Sophie believed this information was essential for me to grasp. Was she seeking compassion? Did she think I would come in and set everything right? In that case, disappointment awaited her. I chose not to reply to the email. What was I meant to express? That's unfortunate, but it doesn't concern me. I refused to be pulled back into their chaos. Regardless of how dire their situation became, their decisions were made, and now they must face the outcomes. Yet, a part of me sensed a sense of validation. They were facing difficulties, and although I didn't derive any satisfaction from their pain, I couldn't shake the feeling that fate was finally addressing their past actions. Nathan and Olivia had shattered my existence, and now their seemingly flawless world was beginning to show signs of fracture. Madeline observed my unusual silence that evening and inquired if all was well. I shared the details of the email with her, and she nodded in response, her expression a blend of gentleness and resolve. "You've put in the effort to move forward," she said. "Resist the temptation to be drawn back in." She was correct. I had invested considerable effort in reconstructing my existence, and I wouldn't allow their issues to throw me off course at this point. The situation with my family was no longer something I needed to bear the weight of. The following morning, I removed Sophie's email and blocked her address. It was a challenge, yet it was essential. I refused to allow them to manipulate me with guilt or pity to re-enter my life. That Nathantmas with Madeline's family seemed like a pivotal moment. For the first time, I understood what it meant to be genuinely liberated from the toxicity that had surrounded my upbringing. I was not seeking my family's approval or validation. I discovered individuals who valued me for my true self, rather than for any contributions I could make to their lives. No longer would the turmoil of my history dictate who I am. I had crafted a fresh existence, and I had no intention of glancing back. By June, I was pleased with the progress I had made. Life was steady. My bond with Madeline deepened with each passing day. While my family faded into the background of my life, I severed connections with everyone. dismissing each insincere effort to reach out and concentrating solely on my own wellness. However, they certainly had more in store for me. On a Saturday morning, while getting ready for a run, a knock echoed at my door. To my surprise, I wasn't anticipating a visitor, and as I glanced through the peephole, I found myself momentarily paralyzed. It was Sophie. I hadn't laid eyes on her in more than a year, and for just a fleeting moment, the thought crossed my mind to feign my absence. However, I finally opened the door, and the moment she laid eyes on me, she erupted in tears. "Ethan, I'm truly sorry," she cried, moving into the hallway before I could even extend an invitation for her to come in. "I ought to have defended you more. I could have accomplished so much more." Her apology took me by surprise. For an extended period, Sophie had occupied a role of passivity in my existence. A person who never caused me direct harm, yet also never defended me. Her willingness to take responsibility caught me off guard, leaving me unsure of how to react. "I severed my connections with Nathan and Olivia," she continued, dabbing at her tears. "And mother, I reached my breaking point." I crossed my arms and rested against the doorframe. "What is it that you desire, Sophie?" She paused, her eyes brimming with fresh tears. "I simply wish to converse. Father wishes to have a conversation as well. Could we arrange a meeting, please?" I ought to have declined. Every fiber of my being urged me to close the door and leave it all behind. Yet, there was an intensity in her gaze, a silent urgency, that caused me to hesitate. Despite my reservations, I consented. Several days later, we gathered at a serene diner located on the fringes of the city. Sophie was already there with our dad, Richard. It had been ages since our last encounter. Since that moment I confronted him outside Emma's apartment, and the air between us was heavy with unspoken words. As I drew near, he rose to his feet and extended his hand in greeting. I did not take it. I took a seat opposite them and settled in, anticipating the moment one of them would break the silence. "Apologies," my father murmured, his tone subdued, "for all that has transpired. I could have taken greater steps to safeguard you. I ought to have approached the situation in another way. It may not have been significant, yet it exceeded my expectations." For an instant, a spark of hope ignited within me. Perhaps there is a chance for redemption. Then, the door to the diner swung open, and in walked my mom. I felt a sudden tension rise within me. Richard had the grace to appear sheepish. "She wanted to come," he remarked, as though that clarified anything. And naturally, right behind her were Nathan and Olivia. I rose, prepared to depart. However, Sophie seized my arm. "Ethan, I urge you to listen to them." That was the end. I rose to my feet, interrupting my mom before she could utter a word. "I declared that you are no longer my family. My voice is icy. If you seek forgiveness, look for another to deceive. I'm finished." I turned to Sophie and remarked, "Sophie, what you did was utterly pathetic and truly wicked. You demonstrate that this family is rife with manipulators and lowlifes. Trust is something that has been irrevocably lost between us. You are no longer in my life, and if any of you attempt to reach out to me again, I will take legal action." I tossed some money onto the table for my coffee and exited, disregarding the voices that trailed behind me. In that instant, I realized there was no way to retreat. No amount of begging, pleading, or tears would change my mind. I was finished being the target for their chaos. At 28, it seems I've experienced multiple lifetimes since the turmoil within my family began. Reflecting on the past, it feels almost surreal, as if it occurred to another person. Yet the scars serve as an unyielding reminder that it was undeniably real. I've emerged from this experience with greater strength, wisdom, and a supportive circle of people who genuinely care for me. Last year, Madeline and I became engaged. It was nothing extravagant, merely the two of us at our beloved park in Pittsburgh. I refrained from making a grand gesture, having realized that true love doesn't require such displays. When I proposed to her, tears filled her eyes, and she instantly replied with a yes. That moment was like the last piece of the puzzle I had been attempting to fit together since everything shattered. She's not merely my fiancée, she's my companion in every possible way. She has been there for me through every high and low, offering an ear without judgment, and has never attempted to steer me back to the family I chose to leave behind. Being with her brings a sense of safety I never imagined I could experience. The most exciting news is that we are anticipating the arrival of our first child. A boy. Whenever I imagine the moment of holding him for the first time, a wave of excitement and nervousness washes over me. I never imagined I would feel prepared for fatherhood, particularly after the tumultuous environment of my upbringing. Yet, the faith Madeline has in us fills me with optimism. I genuinely feel that we will do everything possible to provide our son with a life rich in love, respect, and stability, the kind of life I never experienced. One of the initial actions I undertook to completely cut connections with my family was altering my last name. I took my time with it. For quite a while, I wavered, pondering whether it was too radical or if it would genuinely make a difference. As time went on, I came to understand that my last name was a weight tethering me to my painful history. And I was prepared to release it. Standing in the courthouse, filling out the paperwork, was an oddly surreal experience. As the judge put pen to paper, a surge of relief washed over me, akin to finally closing a door that had long intimidated me. I selected a surname that resonated with me, connected to a personal hero instead of my ancestral lineage. Madeline wholeheartedly backed my choice. She even playfully mentioned that she'd adopt my new last name after we tie the knot, saying, "We're beginning our own legacy now." That truly resonated with me. The concept of crafting something original, something distinct from all the hurt and deceit, became my central pursuit. After severing connections with my family, I've caught glimpses of their happenings here and there. Not that I actively pursue it, but occasionally, mutual acquaintances inadvertently bring it up. It seems that my parents have officially separated now. My father resides in a modest rental on the edge of town, while my mother remains in the family home, striving to uphold appearances. Regarding Nathan and Olivia, it seems that fate has not favored them. They find themselves overwhelmed by financial burdens, and it seems their relationship is facing significant challenges. Olivia has faced job loss, and Nathan's employment situation remains uncertain as well. I see the irony clearly. Despite all their efforts to bring me down, it's them who are now fighting to keep their heads above water. Sophie is not doing particularly well either. Her fiancé departed just a few months prior to their planned wedding. I lack the specifics, and to be frank, it doesn't matter to me. Her decision to support Nathan and Olivia during the crucial moments is something I find unforgivable. The most recent communication I received from any of them was more than a year ago, when my mother sent me yet another letter pleading for me to reach out again. I didn't bother to open it. I discarded it without a second thought. Their current feelings of regret are theirs alone to bear, not my responsibility. A significant lesson I've gained from all of this is the value of establishing boundaries. For a long time, I allowed my family to manipulate my feelings, convincing me that I needed to forgive them and that their issues were somehow my burden to bear. Severing ties was a challenging decision. The situation was chaotic, yet, it was the sole path for me to genuinely progress. At times, I find myself pondering whether my family reflects on their decisions with a sense of regret. Do they reflect on the hurt they inflicted? Are they aware of the magnitude of what they forfeited by turning against me? I may never find out, and that's perfectly fine. Whether they feel regret or not is irrelevant now. What matters now is that I have finally discovered tranquility. Leaving toxic relationships can be incredibly challenging, particularly when they involve family. Yet, at times, this is the sole path to safeguard your tranquility and cultivate the existence you are worthy of. There is no requirement to maintain relationships with individuals simply due to a shared genetic connection. Family transcends mere blood relations. It's about those who stand by you, uplift you, and care for you without reservation. With Madeline beside me and our little one on the way, I finally have the family I've always dreamed of. Dear listeners, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments section below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to stay connected.